Today we're going to talk about relational dialectics theory, which was formulated and created by theorist Leslie Baxter. We will see two questions that will clearly emerge throughout this study as we present the topics and the research within it. But before we ask and pose these two questions, we have to first learn and seek after how relational dialectics has really come to be defined. Relational dialectics has come to be defined as two or more opposing forces that help to cultivate relational growth. In fact, the theorist that has created this theory, Leslie Baxter, states that these two or more opposing forces create unity, and the unity results out of the oppositions that continually take place within a relationship. And this unity of opposition helps to cultivate growth within a relationship and really becomes the foundation of relational growth. Therefore, now we can ask and pose two questions that will emerge within the study. The first one is unity the result of conflict rather than a single part of it? And can unity exist without conflict being present? Before we answer these questions, we will have a brief overview of what our expectations will be within this study. The first one will be that we will gather various methods to construct a greater ideal of communication. Then we will seek to show how communication is applied. And then lastly, we will see how effective communication, according to Baxter, results out of a unity of opposition within relationships. Now that we've introduced this topic and this theory, and at a surface level, we can now start to define what dialectics and dialogue consist of. Beginning with dialectics, we can see that by Littlejohn and Foss's definition, who are the authors of our textbook, they define dialectics as really referring to a tension between opposing forces within a system. Dialogue is then stated and defined by an article entitled Building Relationships as the intention to seek mutual understanding and mutual accommodation as an issue or a situation through inquiry. Now that we've been able to define dialectics and dialogue, we can really see the importance of dialectics. We can see that dialectics really can't take place without first dialoguing with one another. That as we dialogue and we converse within relationships, dialectics emerges. Those two or more opposing forces continually emerge as we continually dialogue with other individuals. Therefore, we can see now and we can begin to conform and inform other individuals of really what the importance of dialectics consists of. Beginning with relational tension. Relational tension is very crucial to this aspect of dialectics because it helps us to see that because dialectics consists of two or more opposing forces within a relationship, understanding and really coming to a holistic understanding and view of relational tension and how it affects our relationships is important to this study. Second of all, it helps us to learn to relate to one another through these discourses and through these oppositions. Thirdly, it helps us to understand ourselves and to know ourselves before we can know others, which is crucial for relational growth. Fourth, we see that contradiction and unity take place within dialectics. As theorist Leslie Baxter states, the core concept of a dialectical perspective is, after all, the contradiction, and contradiction is the unity of opposition. Now that we've been able to define what dialectics and dialogue consist of, we can now see how relationships emerges and conforms into dialectics and dialogue. Relationships, according to Littlejohn and Foss, are a place where contradictions are managed. Therefore, we can see that the combination of relationships, dialectic, and dialogue form in such a way that helps us to really grow and to really help us to understand more the growth and the purpose for growth within a relationship. We can see that relationships are, in essence, the outer shell with dialogue and dialectics being intergrained within relationships. As we dialogue with other individuals, dialectics, those two or more opposing forces, will continuously emerge. And as they continuously emerge, they form contradictions. Therefore, within relationships are that place where contradictions can be managed, which helps us to essentially grow in relationship with other individuals. Now that we've defined each of these terms, we can look at how discourse and opposition are within relationships. There are two forces within relationships which seek to really form what relationships in this theory consist of. The first one is the centripetal force, and it seeks to impose order. The second one is the centrifugal force, and this one seeks to disrupt the order. So basically, Littlejohn and Foss were essentially saying that in every relationship we will have these two forces, and that inevitably both of them will always be present. And because of that, as one seeks to impose order and one seeks to disrupt the order, that we really have to learn to not only accept these forces, but to really be aware of them within our relationships, and to grow from them and be engaged in them, and therefore really take them and allow that friction to occur, so that way relational growth emerges and cultivates between those two or more individuals. Now that we've seen how discourse and opposition is present in relationships, and the benefit, according to Baxter, it has in relationships, we can now look at the unity of opposition. The unity of opposition basically says that Baxter believes tension is generally always present in relationships. And because of this, since there's no getting around these two forces, the forces that seek to disrupt order and impose order should really learn to be unified, and they should become unified. And we do this through looking at similarities and differences within relationships. Therefore, questions emerge. One question that emerges is unity cultivated through similarities and differences? And if so, what form do these similarities and differences take within communication? Before answering these questions, we can really understand and see that unity of opposition is crucial within Baxter's theory to the growth of relational dialectics, and that without conflict and contradiction, relationships cannot grow. However, author Herman states the opposite. He states that conflict is not a result of relational growth, and relational growth is not a result of conflict. Rather, conflict is only a single entity or a single part or a single portion of relational growth. It is not the holistic view of it. Baxter also admits holes within her theory by saying that the dialectic interplay of opposites is an ongoing feature of relating, and it also has not yet been resolved, as well as saying that opposition is necessary, but not a sufficient condition for contradiction. Therefore, in short, she realized that her theory was simply that. It's still a theory. It has not been proven, and there's still holes that are left to be filled. There's still things that are left to be resolved within this theory, and that she realizes that opposition and contradiction don't have to be dependent on one another. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. They don't have to be present within each other's relationship. Now we will look at the application of unity. We can see that as these two forces take place, we should not be passive in just simply receiving this and receiving these forces, but that we should be active in integrating those forces and what we learn through that in the unity of those oppositions back into society. That we have to become engaged in those forces so that way we can continually grow within relationships. Lastly, we can see that Baxter says change is positive. Baxter and Montgomery believe that change occurs in the confines of contradiction, and that there's always a continual fluctuation between a relationship. And because there's a fluctuation between stability and conflict, that relationships will always change, relationships will always grow, and therefore there will always be conflict, whether resolved or not, within a relationship. However, this brings us back to the question, is unity the result of conflict rather than a single part? We can see that unity is not only the holistic view of conflict, because unity, again, consists of more than one. And if conflict is the only thing that's present within unity, then there cannot be a unity that will emerge or take place. Rather, there has to be conflict, comparison, similarities, differences, a plethora of elements within a relationship to create unity. Therefore, it's a single part, not a holistic view. Then we can see that communication, in short, in conclusion, is the constructs of society and the unity of conflict. We can see that relationships are a unity that need to be formed. Relationships are not simply based on one single entity, but that they're based upon similarities, differences, conflict, comparisons, and that because of this forms unity within a relationship. As we have seen throughout this presentation, that unity is not simply a singleistic view, but it is a holistic view of a combination of several different elements.